Welcome back to Solving Basketball after a couple week hiatus here. Today's guest is Jonathan Safir, who is the Director of Basketball Operations for San Francisco. He was referenced a few times on Kyle Smith's episode, who is the head coach of San Francisco. Jonathan is also a longtime friend of mine, and I don't know why it took this long, but thank you for joining me for an episode.
Jordan, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be on.
So, you know what the first question is. I know you're well aware, so let's start out with that. If we went to the foul line right now and I went under the hoop, you went to the line and shot 100 in a row, how many would you make?
Well, I knew I was going to be on the pod, so I actually did this yesterday. I had our manager, Garrett, rebound for me. Never much of a shooter, but 73 was the number yesterday.
73 out of 100. Okay. And
I'm not never much of a shooter.
You had the manager rebound, and it was like, did you have a warm-up first, or what were the circumstances?
No warm-up. I said, Garrett, Garrett's a big fan of your pod as well, so in your work. So I said, Garrett, I'm going to be on my friend Jordan's podcast tomorrow, and we start with the free throws. After our team workout yesterday, I said, here, let's do it. Took about 12 minutes, 100 free throws, 73.
What is basketball? What is this basketball? Is that basketball? What is basketball?
Got it. Okay. I like it. It's hard to poke any holes at that. So we actually, the first time we met was in high school. We played on a basketball team together in the Maccabi games in San Antonio. We won a gold medal with a little bit of an asterisk, I think, because it was the B division, but we won a gold medal. And yeah, you said you weren't much of a shooter.
Well, first off, that's the greatest ninth place medal and award I've ever been a part of. It was an awesome week, an awesome team, fun group, and for a small Buffalo/Albany team to defeat bigger cities such as Kansas City and Jacksonville, Philadelphia, and come in ninth place and win the B division was a fun time. My game, I would say more of a slasher, hustle guy, energy, blender, not much of a shooter.
Yeah, if there was a technical free throw in that tournament, I'm pretty confident that I would have been the one shooting it, not you.
It could have also been David Birkin over at Stanford.
He's 2 years younger. I don't know. So yeah, well that's actually a good segue though. On that team, so obviously the listeners have some idea of my background with 3 years of experience. You played D3 at Vassar. And then have been at Columbia and San Francisco as a staffer. And there's a third player from that team. There's only probably like 8 guys on the team total. And so a third guy on that team who you just mentioned, what's his role at Stanford?
I think his exact title is Director of Player Development, but he's essentially Director of Basketball Operations or Assistant Director of Basketball Operations, one or the other.
Yes. So the highest regarded coaching, anyways, Maccabi team out there, it was probably 3 out of 8 guys end up working in D1 basketball. And
ironically enough, one of my best friends growing up, Matt Cohen, he was on our team, and his older brother Adam was the associate coach of Stanford. So small world, small group.
Exactly. So that's 4 right there. And so since that tournament, it was probably in like at the end of 9th grade maybe, or 10th grade. And that was not too far after the launch of Hoop Vision, which you were involved in. So obviously we both played basketball and liked basketball and had some type of affinity towards analytics. I remember bouncing ideas and stuff off of you all the time. It was always pulling teeth to try to get you to contribute, though. I don't know. There wasn't much kind of big impact, but not a ton of contributions, I don't think.
Well, my biggest impact was convincing you that the game of basketball was the one to pursue, and that you had skill and talent in a niche that could fill a void in the basketball community more so than baseball, where you were at the time you were a big Fangraphs guy.
I was, yeah.
So my biggest contribution to Hoop Vision was just steering Jordan Sperber to go all in and pursue basketball analytics. And And it was a job well done. Forget any other contribution I had to the site, because that was the most important one, because your work is incredible.
Well, thank you. And I was looking through it a little bit earlier. You did write something about Syracuse's zone. There's a couple other things. If anyone wants to go back into the archive, and yeah, I've been bouncing stuff off of you, I guess since 10th grade or 11th grade.
Yeah, I think that Syracuse zone article might have been senior year of high school, freshman year of college, and I think there was an article we wrote debating the best teams of the Ken Palm era. I mean, there's some stuff that goes back. Not sure how great it was, and I'm not sure I want to really take a look, but I think there was some work in my 16, 17, 18-year-old self did on Hoop Vision, yes.
There you go. Yeah, so that's, the listeners might know Rafi Goldman, who's having a big impact now. There's a couple of people involved right now, but you are the OG, I guess, of Hoop Vision. Employee number 2, even though we didn't make any money, but employee number 2.
No question.
All right, so the real reason that I wanted to have you on is obviously San Francisco is in the WCC. I have covered Gonzaga a decent amount this year and have texted you a little bit about them, but I wanted you to come on the pod, and just kind of similar to when I had Zach Bover on, and we talked about how they game plan for Duke and different stuff about Duke, to do something similar with Gonzaga. So yeah, I don't have a ton planned out. I just really want to talk through them, and the idea is almost similar to how you would probably distribute the information to your team. I don't know if this is how San Francisco does it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but usually at the programs that I started with, we did personnel first. So for the purpose of this podcast, let's focus on the 6 guys. They obviously have some more guys that can play. Like, we won't talk about Jeremy Jones or anyone like that, but we'll go Perkins, Norvell, Kispert, Hachimura, Clark, and Tilly. And you can start off with whoever you want there. Okay, well, for us, we would start off by going over our keys and personnel. The keys are always usually defend, rebound, take care of the ball in one any which order. Mm-hmm. And against these guys, they're statistically, and it's not hyperbole based on hoop math and Ken Palm, they're the best early offense or transition offense on a point per possession basis. And early offense defined by hoop math is the first 10 seconds of shot clock in the history of the sport. They're putting up about, I think it was, last I checked, I don't know what it was recently, but when we played them about a month ago, it was over 1.4, might have even been hovering on 1.5, correct me if I'm wrong, points per possession in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. So our number one key and goal was to limit the transition opportunities, and live ball turnovers lead to fast break points for them and in situations of that such. And obviously that's easier said than done, and there's only really been one WCC team who's been able to execute that, and that was obviously actually St. Mary's kind of did it 1.5, maybe 2 times. Their last game of the regular season, they did a fantastic job. It's kind of a prelude to the WCC title game where they held Gonzaga, I think, 69 points, I think it was. Gonzaga won 59-55 at St. Mary's last game of the regular season. And then obviously the game that was on ESPN that everyone saw right before Selection Sunday was the WCC championship game against St. Mary's, where St. Mary's held them to 47 points on only 60 possessions. And St. Mary's obviously was trying to go under all the screens and dare them to shoot, but also really limited live ball turnovers. I believe they only had 2 or 3 live ball turnovers in that game. And preventing Gonzaga from getting out and running is number one key, more so and more important than any, and more pertinent than any personnel, I think, for them specifically. And that's what we focus on primarily. So you mentioned the live ball turnovers. That's the best way to limit transition is obviously with your offense, but if your shots are going in the net, it's harder for them to run. That's not to say they won't do it at all, but that's the best way. Is there anything beyond that you guys did, maybe leading, like in practices leading up to the game, that was unique to Gonzaga's transition, or was it just your basic principles? No, it was our basic principles. We're kind of steadfast on do what we do and do what we're coached to do, and we crash 3 guys, 3.5 guys. Our 2 guard goes to what we call the ball spot, which is about the free throw line, to try and stop the ball in slow transition, but also
be available for any tip-outs so we like to say 3.5 guys crashing for offensive rebounding purposes. And one thing we thought we could kind of expose them on, and we did a little bit, especially in the first game where we were up by 2 with 3:50 left at home in early January, was they're a little bit vulnerable on the defensive glass on us getting offensive rebounds. They're not a great, for as good of an offensive rebounding team as they're not an elite defensive rebounding team. So it's a catch-22. It's a balance that you have to weigh in terms of getting a good shot and not having live ball turnovers, and then also having a willingness and being able to crash because they're a little bit vulnerable there on the offensive glass, but then also getting back in transition. So there's a lot of things to balance out, and obviously with their personnel, Perkins pushing the ball. I've seen your work and your breakdowns on point Rui, and Norvell can carry it up. So they have a lot of different guys and a lot of different ways to get out and attack. And Kispert flying out shooting. Norvell's a driller. Clark rim runs. Kelly obviously shoots it. Perkins can shoot it. They can hurt you in so many ways, and there's so many different athletes, especially when they get out and run. That it's not easy. There's a reason why they're number 1 or number 2 team in the country.
You mentioned the point guard Rui thing that I tweeted a while ago, which is if he gets a rebound, not always, but a good chunk of the time, he'll push it himself. Was that something you guys showed in film or talked about at all?
A little bit. We mentioned that we were cognizant of him pushing the ball in transition, but he, for as talented as he is, him in transition, I don't think they're quite as explosive or as lethal because he's not quite as good as a passer as some of their guards as their guards bring up in transition. And him bringing up in transition kind of prevents his ability to rim run. And obviously he and Clark are the 2 rim runners and the 2 guys trying to post early and often and really duck in hard with the continuity ball screen stuff that you delved into in great detail. So we obviously didn't want Rui to push the ball because we didn't want them to run at all. But if you had to choose one or the other, I think we'd prefer Rui to push it over Perkins or Norvell.
Yep. I know if we go into the personnel then a little bit more, I know that just based off of a couple of texts that you're pretty high on Norvell in terms of maybe not getting as much credit on Twitter or wherever. What was the emphasis with him? What do you like about Norvell?
I mean, especially in today's space and pace ball, he's a 6'5", 6'6" driller who's become a pretty good defender. So to me, that's a 8, 9, 10, 12-year NBA player. So there's a lot to like about his skill set, and he's getting a lot better off the dribble. He can hurt you in a multitude of ways. Stop behinds, obviously St. Mary's dared him. Stop behinds, I think he shot 1 of 9 or something as that ilk in the WCC title game, but he can do so many different things. He can hurt you in so many different ways, and he's a kid who just keeps getting better and better. He really makes them go in terms of Perkins is their engine. Perkins is probably, just in terms of personnel, maybe even their most valuable individual player. I know you and Rod Balster and Sam Vecini have talked about it a lot, but he might be the most important individual player because he plays 40 minutes a night for them. Kispert is a great offensive rebounder and driller. Norvell, we just talked about at length. Rui, obviously, is very dynamic into so many different things. He's a rebounder, scorer, high usage guy. And Clark is unbelievably efficient. He's an awesome offensive rebounder. I think he had 16 offensive rebounds in the 2 games against us. Crashes relentlessly, plays super hard. Should be a defensive player of the year. And Tilly was battling injuries all year and was kind of nicked up. He actually got hurt again. Second time he played them, hurt his foot again. I know he's back now. He can really shoot it. And Norvell's their engine because he's kind of their enigma. When he's on, they're impossible to guard. They have 2 or 3 drillers, the rim runners, Perkins pushing it. And Norvell doesn't get the credit as the lottery pick Clark, or the lottery pick Hachimura, or the all-league guard Perkins. But there's a reason why he was their 4th all-WCC first teamer. I know the WCC first team has 10 guys, but they have 40% of the team, and he was one of them for a reason.
Yep. No, I agree with you on Perkins or on Norvell. In that video I did on Gonzaga's offense, the thing I said is like, well, they don't really run a lot for him. Well, I mean, that's not how their offense is structured, anyways, to really run things for specific guys. But with the shooting behind ball screens, rejecting ball screens, he's just kind of like a pain. Because you're probably not mentioning or not as focused on him as Hachimura or Clark or even Perkins. You mentioned the St. Mary's going under his ball screens, and I don't think that the stats or the data really backs up that being a good strategy. It clearly worked, but you're dealing with a Gonzaga team that's number one in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency. They're like historically good. So you have to live with something. You have to pick your poison a little bit.
Pick your poison, exactly correct.
Well, so what do you think about going under the Norvell's ball screens? And then is there something that you guys tried, which was like picking your poison a little bit, that may or may not have worked?
Well, we tried a little bit to beat Perkins on the continuity ball screen stuff with the hard duck-ins for Clark and Rui. We kind of tried to beat Perkins to the spot on the other side and dare him to shoot the stop behind, but it's also easier said than done. I mean, he's such a dynamic, such a good player, and great pocket passing, great passer, great vision, great feel, can attack very well. Those guys duck in really hard. And with Clark, I don't know if the stats back it up exactly, but he feels like one of the best offensive rebounders in the country, so you throw that thing up there, and with Clark on the court, there's probably 35% chance that they get it back. So get in the lane, get help side defenders, get in rotations, and you have a guard trying to chip down and block out on Clark. It's easier said than done. In terms of guarding Norvell and the ball screen stuff, we tried to go under, we tried to go over, we tried to mix it up, tried a lot of different things, and obviously didn't have much success. But in terms of what St. Mary's did, St. Mary's kind of executed the perfect game plan in terms of slowing them down and not letting them get in transition with the live ball turnovers and daring them to go under, daring them to shoot going under the screens. It might not be a strategy that works over the course of a 35-game season or an 82 NBA game season or even a best-of-7 NBA playoff series, but in a one-game best-of-1, all it takes is Zach Norvell to shoot 1 of 9 and the team to shoot 3 of 22 or whatever exactly the numbers were, and boom, the strategy works and looks brilliant. So I think a one-game situation is totally different than a 35-game season or 18-game conference season or a best-of-7 NBA playoff series.
You mentioned the Brandon Clark offensive rebounding percentage, and the stats do back that up. He is 25th in the country in offensive rebounding percentage at 14.3%. And I've kind of been back and forth a little bit in my mind if they're better offensively with Tilly versus Clark this year, because on the one hand, Clark has all that offensive rebounding, and they do those duck-ins that you're talking about, which is on my list of things to talk about. But with Tilly, you can get away from the duck-ins and just spread the court, have him shoot threes. But let me ask you about, we'll go all three of those big men. So what were you emphasizing to your team scouting report? What was the coaching staff emphasizing for Clark, Hachimura, and Tilly, how they're similar, how they're different, that sort of thing?
I think all three are obviously awesome, but Clark, we talked about as being an incredible athlete and rebounder. Hachimura is a high-usage guy. He has a tendency to catch the ball in the high post, mid-post area, and take a dribble to him on a spin. So we would try and dig down and send a guard to try and tap that thing away and make him see bodies when he drove and kind of got tunnel vision. Until he comes in, like you said, face to the floor and adds a totally different dynamic to them. And I think it was an incredible coaching job by the whole staff and Coach Q and those guys, because it can't be easy to have to reincorporate and reintegrate Tilly after having an awesome year last year, missing time this year, and then coming back to an offense and team that was number one in the country and the best offense in KenPom and one of the best offenses in the history of the KenPom database. And he kind of changes, like you said, the way they play. So the fact that they were able to seamlessly do that until after the bench role, all credit to him, and it's really impressive.
I'll start this with the caveat that all three players are really good. They would start for most teams in the country, and I understand that. Just from a perspective of if you're on the other sidelines as a part of the San Francisco staff, who this is a loaded question, but what do you think their best lineup is with in terms of those three bigs?
I think it depends on the opponent, because I think against most teams it'll be Perkins and Norvell and Kispert and Clark and Hachimura, because there's something to the continuity. But there's also a 3 big lineup with Tilly instead of Kispert. And then I think we need to have Hachimura and Clark out there at all times with Perkins and Norvell. So it's either Tilly or Kispert. But against WCC opponents, the best lineup seemed to be Perkins, Norvell, Kispert, Hachimura, and Clark. So that's the lineup I'd have to go with because WCC for Knox on it, 9th best league overall, and if you take our 8th best league overall and take out Gonzaga and just look at the numbers without Gonzaga, it's still 9th best league overall. So it's pretty good competition we're playing against on every Thursday and Saturday, and that 5-man lineup is pretty historical.
Well, I had the time for you to mention the WCC fact without Gonzaga at like 15:30 in the podcast. I don't know how long we've been going, but I knew that was going to come. So yeah, we looked it up. That even if you take out Gonzaga from the WCC conference, I'm pretty sure it still ranks higher than the Mountain West. Is that right? I'll let you tout that.
Yes, it ranks higher than the Mountain West guy. And you're right, have to stay on brand, have to rep the WCC, have to let everyone know that our league is very good, and St. Mary's beating Gonzaga and hanging tough with Villanova was not a surprise to really any of us in the league. They're a very good team, and yes, the 9th best league above the Mountain West, above the A-10, above the SoCon, even without Gonzaga. 8th best league with Gonzaga, right behind Pac-12 and AAC.
Okay, so if we go back to let's dive in on the Gonzaga offense again. So we've already mentioned the duck-ins with the ball screen occurring. Is there anything that you did scheme-wise on the court in shoot-around or practice? I guess I have never really thought about it from the defense's perspective that much this year. So they don't throw the ball into the post that much off the duck-in. I feel like they're trying to turn the corner. So what were you telling the big who is getting ducked in by either Clark or Hachimura?
Yeah, it's a three-headed monster because, like we said, yes, Perkins attacking off the dribble or Norvell and looking to turn the corner. They do sometimes look to throw it in, and then they also, when they turn the corner, if they're going to throw the ball up at the rim, you're likely in those aforementioned rotations, and there's probably a 35-40% chance when you're in rotations and they have 3 bodies in the fans, they come up with rebound as well. We were kind of just emphasizing our guys to push out, try and push out the big and not get ducked in and be physical and not let that happen, try and identify it early and see the continuity ball screen happening and try and do your work early. But like kind of the theme throughout, it's easier said than done against these guys when they have 2 lottery picks and 4 or 5 pros.
The other thing that you guys did on the ball screens, which I think a lot of WCC teams tried, I know BYU definitely did, was ice. What do you think about trying to ice? Well, the thing I would be worried about is they do those throw and chase ball screens out top. So let's say Perkins dribbles down, he swings to Rui, who's out on the perimeter, and then Rui will quickly go throw and chase to get Norvell in the ball screen, and those can be kind of hard to ice because they happen so soon, so quickly.
Right.
So you guys, I believe, tried to ice those. Could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Tried.
And were you able to actually get into it?
We tried, but it's not easy. And to answer your earlier question, that exact action with Tilly and Tilly is almost impossible to guard. How do you stop Perkins going side to side, reversing the ball, and it's Tilly who goes into a quick ball through Norvell because Norvell can push through drives and stop behind him, and then you have Tilly on an empty corner, potentially popping. Have fun game planning for that defensively.
I totally agree with you there, and that's kind of been my point on Brandon Clark all year long is, he's really, really good. We haven't even talked about defense yet, and he's the best defensive player on the team.
Maybe the country.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say at least top 5, probably maybe in the country. And he offensive rebounds. I mean, as a roller, he's as good as anybody because of how high of a jumper he is, and he's a good finisher. But with Tilly in the game, it's different, but there's almost no chance. Like that's the pop against ice or any kind of soft ball screen coverage. So really, the nuance here is that they're both really, really good, and that Gonzaga is probably the best offense in the country regardless. But yeah, that's just been, I guess I have a little bit of I like to go against the grain sometimes, and so that's been
Sure.
my Clark take, anyways.
Sure, and so from our perspective, when you're playing against Gonzaga, you're heavy underdogs going in regardless. So having, like you just said, having Silly out there, and if they shoot more threes, and then they're not quite as good defensively, I would say that increases your potential outcomes, your range of outcomes. There's higher variance, and then you just not, I don't want to say hoping they miss and boxing out those long shots and theoretically they'd be a little more vulnerable defensively. So you want to kind of increase those range of outcomes and percentages and kind of play the percentage because you're an underdog going in anyway. The number one team defensive. You have your work cut off from the jump. So from our perspective, we'd rather have Tilly than you.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for a team that doesn't have a lot of size. You guys actually have, Jimbo Lowell, I felt like gave Gonzaga some troubles, especially in the game in San Francisco. Well, I know that you probably don't know Florida State particularly well, given that whenever you are working for a team, most of the film and basketball you're watching is opponents. But Florida State has a ton of length and athleticism, especially, really on their whole team, but especially the bigs. I think that whether or not this makes a huge difference or not is a different story, but Brandon Clark and Hachimura are going to look a little bit undersized, I think, in this Sweet 16 matchup. So if you had all of that length, what are you doing? I guess you could be more aggressive on the ball screens, which is the opposite of what St. Mary's did, and trying to just bottle them up inside. Like, Florida State legitimately has a 7-3 guy who starts, doesn't play that much. But what do you think about Gonzaga versus a lot of length?
Yes, I'm not too familiar and acclimated with the personnel of Florida State. But I'm not sure if anybody in WCC, I don't believe so, did it. And I don't know about their non-league foes, but I would love to see the team try and switch everything on them. Just as a basketball fan and an aspiring coach, I would love to see kind of how they respond and react to the teams that switch everything on them. And if Florida State has the length, that would greatly intrigue me. Or if they're 7-3, the 7-3 big man, I don't know how athletic he is, but if he can protect the rim and kind of enable them to scheme defensively, like the Utah Jazz or Rudy Gobert just hanging under the rim, and the Jazz are able to really get out on shooters and play aggressive and kind of force you into that middle area where they're able to aggressively take away the three ball and know they have Rudy Gobert, in this case, the 7-3 guy, back at the rim. That kind of forces tough twos overhand, mid-range shots, and even shots in the paint over 7-3 hand can't be too easy, and made it a survivor percentage. So I'd love to see either of those two strategies employed. I don't know if Florida State, like I said, I don't know if Florida State has the personnel for that. I don't know if there's any team in the country who has the personnel for that, but it would be fun to see the most dynamic and lethal offense in the sport go up against either of those strategies.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I'm looking it up now, and Kumaji on Florida State is actually listed at 7'4". He would probably have a good amount of difficulty switching out onto the perimeter. But they do have Kabengele, who comes off the bench and actually plays more. He's 6'10" and pretty ideal to be switching all that stuff. But getting away from Florida State a little bit, Duke was a team that really tried to switch everything probably after the first 15 minutes of the game against Gonzaga. They went to mostly switching. Bolden, their big guy, didn't play at all down the stretch because they were switching. But I think the problem was it was their first game, or one of their first games, really trying that. Now they're doing it a lot, but they had the right idea, but they just kept on messing up switches, miscommunicating. I think that Gonzaga should get a lot of credit for that, what they ran, but yeah, Duke is the one team that kind of tried it, and you would think they will probably see it before the tournament's over if they keep advancing.
No question. And a quick little tangent on that. Gonzaga is one of the few teams to beat Duke with Zion. And I love how the selection committee wants to not credit Duke fully for losses without Zion, yet teams who beat Duke without Zion get the same credit for a win against Duke, regardless of whether Zion played or not. You can't have it both ways. Either Duke, all games in my opinion should count the same regardless of who plays and who coaches. But if you're going to count Duke's games with Zion for Duke at a lesser extent, then you need to also count the wins. Selective committee should also count the wins at a lesser extent, but they don't seem to do that.
I agree with you. And what are your thoughts on this? Going off of that, like I think that injuries, just like if you're like when Gonzaga lost to St. Mary's because Zach Norvell, a good shooter, couldn't make threes. I mean, injuries. There's other parts of the game that are out of your control that the committee doesn't look at, which supposedly they look at injuries. And then also, like, some of it is in your control. Some coaches are better than others at giving guys rest, and some coaches use that time to try to get better and probably put themselves at more risk for an injury. To me, it should not be a factor in the selection process. What do you think?
I agree wholeheartedly. When Gonzaga plays Duke or Gonzaga plays San Francisco, regardless of who's on the court at that particular game and in that particular moment, if San Francisco's win against Gonzaga or Duke's win against Gonzaga, Gonzaga's win against Duke, or Gonzaga's win against San Francisco should be treated the same holistically based on their entire body of work for San Francisco and counted the same, not based on, Virginia Tech beat Duke without Zion, Syracuse beat Duke without Zion. Nope, they beat Duke. Zion was hurt. That's part of the game. That's part of basketball.
We're on the same page, and from the first San Francisco themed episode of Solving Basketball with Kyle Smith, I feel like your boss. I feel like he would be on the same page as well. I remember the thing he said that stuck with me was that was if it was the eye test, then there would be no point in playing the games. Basically, like you have to play the games. His example was LeBron James wins the eye test every time. And yeah, as someone who watched film on almost every team, at least myself or Rafi did for every team to make the Bible, I have no idea who deserves to be in the tournament. It's like, it's just not really relevant. You can't even watch that many teams and really have opinions at that level. I think it has to
Agreed.
be, the resume has to get you in.
They keep a scoreboard for a reason. So the eye test is played out over the course of the game, and it's called the scoreboard. But one matchup that I really wanted to see, we have experienced both of them. Obviously, it's not going to happen now, but would have been a potential Elite Eight matchup between Gonzaga and Buffalo. That one could have been first to 90 or first to even 100 would win in terms of two teams that love to attack. Get an early offense, get an early game, push the pace, shoot the three, crash the glass. And both teams are much grittier and tougher than the quote-unquote eye test or the average fan wants to give credit for, whether that's because they have Buffalo and the max score and Gonzaga across their chest and not Duke or Carolina, or because whatever the reason may be, those teams, those are both for different levels. Gonzaga is the top one or two team in the country, and Buffalo top 16 or 20, maybe even higher. They had a tough draw off Texas Tech, but that would have been a really fun matchup. And we had the opportunity to play Buffalo and Belfast, Northern Ireland, I think the 1st of December, and that was a fun game, obviously. And it was a fun environment to be part of. We would like to have been 1 point better, not 4 or 5 points worse. It was a good experience for our guys and a great learning opportunity and chance for our team to get better and learn about ourselves. It was actually our first loss of the season back in December.
Yeah, so you played both of those teams. I think that those two and North Carolina are the three fastest teams in the tournament in terms of average offensive possession length. Buffalo is a little bit different from Gonzaga in that a lot of times they just have a wide open paint. They don't even duck anyone in on the initial rim run. Sometimes they will with Perkins, but they're 5 out a lot. And what was the preparation similar for those two in terms of the transition offense?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, it was a little bit different for Buffalo in terms of second night of a back-to-back. We didn't know exactly who we were going to play. We had to beat Stephen F. Austin and Buffalo to beat Milwaukee.
Yeah.
We were obviously hoping to get a crack at Buffalo, so our prep was a lot less. We're fighting the time change, the time difference. The second night of a back-to-back. We were in game time with the television stuff for CBS Sports in Belfast. So we had less preparation time, so I don't want to say the preparation was the exact same. But the concepts and the ideas and the keys were very similar, yeah.
So lastly here, let's talk about Gonzaga's defense, and I'll just kind of summarize their season almost like analytically, and then let you go into anything schematically that you emphasize or try to take advantage of, or whatever the case is. But at the beginning of the season, in non-conference play, their defense was struggling. They were, I want to say, around 40th or 50th in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom, maybe for a while there, even worse than that. And obviously, they played a pretty strong schedule. We already talked about the Duke game. They played Washington, Creighton, Tennessee, North Carolina. And yeah, everyone seemed to be of the consensus that Brandon Clark, it was, like you said, he's probably the best defensive player in the country, and he protects the rim at a really high level. So you would think a rim protector, and it's not like they're non-athletes on the team, that this would be a good defense. And sure enough, they've improved dramatically. I think they finished first in the WCC in points per possession allowed. And they've gotten pretty respectable overall on that side of the floor. I heard during one Gonzaga game, I heard announcers talking about that they brought up the KenPom number to the team, and basically, having worked for teams, I'm sure this happened in a locker room situation where they said, national champion teams never win with our defensive numbers. I think that you could explain some of it by just kind of a focus on that side of the ball. But I'll admit that I haven't watched their defense nearly as closely as their offense. So what is it on that side of the court that you guys emphasize?
Against them, we were looking to get the ball in the post, like you, I think, talked about early on in this podcast in the game in San Francisco. I don't think they really had an answer for Jimbo Lowell. He had foul trouble, but he was very productive, and as was Matt McCarthy, and maybe we could kind of get the ball inside and try and mitigate and neuter Clark's ability to be the best outside defender in the country, and kind of just try and go right at him or keep the ball away from him and try and get him out of the play. So we emphasize getting the ball in the post, screening cards, flipping, rolling, and then obviously, like we talked about, in the range of outcomes and variance, there's a certain amount of threes that you need to get up to have a chance. They need to go to the high clip. You're not going to beat them without. I would be hard pressed to see a WCC team, or maybe even anybody in the country, beat them taking 12 or 15 threes. You probably need to take 20 plus. I'd even say closer to 25, maybe even 30, and make them at a 40 or so percent clip, just in the percentages and the variance in numbers. Now you might make them at a 10% clip and lose by 10 or 12 or 15 more points than you want, or you might make them at a 50% clip and win or be right in the game like we were the first time. But we kind of emphasized getting the ball in the post, running when we could, screening hard, slipping, and then not being afraid to let it fly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember we talked about that Jimbo Lowell thing, but to get more specific, there were, I think, back-to-back plays where Clark, it looked like their scout on Jimbo Lowell was all left shoulder in the post, and he was like really sitting on the left shoulder, trying to not let him get to that right hand. And I think the first time he did get there and still made the hook shot anyways, it wasn't a really high percentage look, but then the second time he had a nice counter move. And for all the praise that Clark gets, and it's valid for sure, I think that you have to make him guard in the post, and Hachimura as well, get him to guard, and they will likely see some of these strong post players starting with Florida State. But yeah, the other thing that they've been doing a lot recently is switching. Did they switch against you guys?
Yeah, the second time they switched a lot, and it kind of flustered us a little bit. But I to go back in your Clark statement, I agree. You have to go right at him for a couple of reasons. Like I said, like we already talked about, to kind of mitigate and neutralize his help side defense, because help side blocks spark transition and give them life. But also, if you can get him in foul trouble, they're a different team without him. His energy plays, his offensive rebounds, his putback dunks, his transition lobs over the top give them unbelievable amount of energy that it's hard to stop when they're rolling and firing on all cylinders and playing with that sort of poise and energy and enthusiasm.
What do you think about they can switch so well because of Clark? That's one thing that he's absolutely elite at, is being able to guard out on the perimeter on the switches. So I'm not sure what you guys necessarily do against switches, but it's almost like you just have to reverse the ball and go away from him if that's the case. If he's out on a guard, I know he gave Jordan Ford a bunch of trouble, who is obviously another really, really good WCC player.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do against Clark and those types of athletes and he switch, but obviously reversing the ball, flipping, just trying to get creative. There's no reinventing the wheel, So try and do what you can, and at some point, as we saw, I think in Rockets Warriors West Conference Finals last year, when each team is switching everything, at some point you got to be able to take your man off the bounce and get to the basket and create a shot for others. And it's easier said than done against Zach Norvell and Brandon Clark and Rui Hachimura and Josh Perkins.
No doubt. Well, I'm assuming, to wrap up, that you believe that they are one of the best teams in the country. There's definitely skeptics still, given them not coming from a Power 5 conference, and there's a perception that Gonzaga underperforms in the tourney, which I don't think is backed up by the data. But I won't have you comment necessarily on like how they compare to the other top teams, because I know you haven't seen them quite that much. But what would be your final thoughts, I guess, on Gonzaga?
I'm absolutely biased, but if I was filling out a bracket last week, I would have Gonzaga winning it all. Their combination of size, athleticism, offensive prowess, early offense ability, and like we said, their defense the last month or two, and they're switching everything and their scheme schematically, personnel, they're the total package of a team. And I have a hard time seeing anybody knocking them off. Now, I could look like a fool and Florida State that their combination of athletes could take them down a day or two after this is posted, but we shall see. I guess that's the beauty of the tournament, being six different best of ones as opposed to a best of seven. All it takes is one off shooting night, one Aubrey Dawkins tipping, and Duke goes down, and that's all it's going to take to knock anybody out. So it's never smart to say if the team will win percentage-wise, but I think the team most likely to win it all would be Gonzaga.
The beauty of the tournament too is that they could win it all. Like, let's say Florida State has a terrible shooting game, and then their Elite Eight opponent has a terrible shooting game, and they could win it all without being the best team too. It works both ways. So that's why ultimately it will be hard to ever really make strong conclusions, but it's with the fact that the Sweet 16 there weren't so many upsets, it's going to be harder to luck your way into a national championship by any means. No
question. I think we had this debate or discussion a while back. I believe it was the 2011 team, UConn team with Kemba Walker and Jeremy Lamb, where they got extremely hot and won the Big East tournament and then won it all. And I remember discussing with you that I thought at that point in time in the month of March they were the best team in the country. And I remember you explicitly and specifically telling me, just analytically and backed by data and facts, that even though they won 10 games in a row or whatever it was, they were not the best team in the country.
Right. So, yeah, it's a tough distinction to make, and I don't necessarily remember like what their adjusted efficiency margin was during that 10 or 11 game run. But the counter argument to them being the best team in the country would be, well, you could take any team's best 10 or 11 stretch, and it's going to look really, really good. And the idea would be that it just came at the right time for UConn. I understand that people would think, well, they raise their level of competition at the best moment, and that makes them a better team. And I don't know. I mean, that could be true. But for the most part, I think the really the two examples of national champions that have done that are UConn, and those were different teams. One, it was the Kemba Walker team, and then the Shabazz Napier team. But for the most part, no one, Butler came really close a couple of times. But yeah, those are the exceptions.
We're seeing something similar right now. I mean, it's only been 2 games in the tournament, But I think the top 14 KenPom teams are in the Sweet 16. I think LSU is 17 or 18 at KenPom, and Oregon's up to 29. But this run they've had, they're a top 16 team in the country by any measure over the last X amount of games since the Pac-12 tournament and a game or two before that and right now. But obviously, over the course of the season, I think they dropped. They had to be in the 50s, 60s, or 70s in KenPom for a while before they push up to 28 or 29 that they're currently sitting at. And we'll see how high they can continue to climb. Obviously, they have a daunting task ahead this weekend.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if this applies to UConn or not, but Oregon's a good point as a team that we can probably say is legitimately better. So a couple reasons. I know they changed their lineup. There's like a legitimate change. And UConn probably had something like this too that I'm just misremembering. But they've gone a lot bigger recently, and they play zone, and their defense has been really, really elite since those changes. And then the other thing that's interesting about Oregon, and this has been something that KenPom has talked about a lot, and other people as well, is the preseason expectations. So like your preseason ranking is very important beyond even like the AP poll 6 weeks later when people are just picking based off of recent wins and losses. Oregon lost Bowl, which had a lot to do with that preseason ranking, but they, like recruiting wise, have a ton of talent that maybe is why they were able to figure it out, or it's very possible that they got hot at the right time and it's a false narrative. You know, it's tough to say.
Well, that's the beauty of March, and that's why it's March Madness, right? That's what makes this game the best.
For sure. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think we went as in depth on Gonzaga as is out there, and I appreciate your personal experience having coached against them twice. What's your Twitter handle? How can I get people to follow you?
My Twitter handle is my name, @JonathanSafir.
@JonathanSafir on Twitter. Don't go up and dig the old Hoop Vision posts up from either of our work back in high school, because they're not good, but they are out there. And Jonathan Safir on Twitter. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again probably this summer, I would think.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And we're closing in on, we're north of 50 minutes, closing in on an hour here. I have a hard time believing that anybody is going to be listening to this whole podcast. So I think that Twitter push is going to be all for naught, but I appreciate it regardless.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll let the numbers speak for themselves if you get some followers.
I appreciate it, Jordan. Have a great one. Thanks for having me on.
No hand checking Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc.